begin. So far in the Tanya, we are 2/3 of the way through the first chapter. And the first chapter makes the following point. To be a tzaddik, to be a righteous person, or to be a beinoni, which is the highest aspiration of the average person, is not a question of how well you behave. If it were a question of how well you behave, there really is no difference between the tzaddik and the beinoni. Which means the Alter Rebbe is introducing us to a new focus for how we serve Hashem, and that is that there is an external reality in the service of Hashem, and there is an internal reality in the service of Hashem. Not only is there an external world that we have to live in and serve Hashem in, and then an internal world of learning Torah and davening and serving Hashem, but in the world of service of Hashem itself, there is an internal and an out and an external. And of course, Chassidus wants to draw our attention to the innermost sanctuary of our souls, so that we are serving Hashem in the very, very best, holiest, purest, highest, truest, that's really the significant part, truest way. Uno momento, por favor. And so the Alter Rebbe starts off by saying, where do we find a beinoni? How do we define a beinoni? And the Alter Rebbe proves that you cannot make that judgment call based on a person's behavior. Although on Judgment Day, a person will indeed be judged according to their behavior. The majority of a person's behavior is how he will be judged. However, in actual fact, you cannot determine if a person is a tzaddik or a beinoni just by how many mitzvahs they did versus how many sins they committed, God forbid. Because a beinoni, as we know, the Alter Rebbe proved it beyond the shadow of a doubt, yes? A beinoni is not a person who has any sin. What then is the story of the internal life of a Jew? If it's not the external, if we're not judging them on the basis of their external service of Hashem, then on what basis are we judging the people? And when we say the people, we mean exclusively ourselves. Every other human being, we give them the benefit of the doubt. We say about every other human being that it's a privilege and a mitzvah and it's like greeting the Holy One, blessed be He, when you meet another Jew who has inside them the holy neshama, which is a chelek elokah mimal. It's a tremendous privilege, and we're thrilled, and it's an honor. But now we're talking about ourselves. We're talking about ourselves. We want to do it right. So the Alter Rebbe relies, for this part of the first chapter, the Alter Rebbe relies very heavily on a book written by Rabbi Chayim Vital. Rabbi Chayim Vital was the primary student of the Arizal. The story, as I recall it, is that the Arizal gave exclusive license to Rabbi Chayim Vital to record in writing the teachings of the Arizal. Nobody else has this license. And it happened one Saturday night that they went out on a boat in the middle of the Yam Kinneret, the Yam HaKinneret next to Tiberias, which is also next to Tzfat, where the school of the mystics gathered and lived and functioned. They went out onto the lake and they rowed around in a boat back and forth, and the Arizal seemed to be looking for something. And they finally found the spot, and he dipped a cup into the water of the Yam Kinneret and gave it to Rabbi Chayim Vital and said, here, drink, say a bracha and drink. This is the spring of Miriam. So he found in the Yam Kinneret, he found the spring of Miriam, and this way he gave Rabbi Chayim Vital from the waters that inspired the people in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. And he gave Rabbi Chayim Vital that water, and his mind was opened, and he became very receptive to all the teachings of his Rebbe, the Holy Arizal. He is the one that wrote all the works of the Arizal. He also wrote works of his own. Okay, most famous among his works recording the teachings of the Arizal is Eitz Chaim. There's another volume called Pre-Eitz Chaim, which is a collection of other teachings that were not so well organized, also from the Arizal, as transmitted by Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital also wrote his own book, and one of them is called Sha'arei Kedusha. Very small book, 5 parts, and very easy reading, in fact. I was surprised when I was doing the research for this class. It's very easy to read it. It's a delightful book, actually. It is Kabbalah, so there's no need to pursue it if you're not in the mood. This then is the foundation, the first 2 chapters of the first section of Sha'arei Kedusha, or Sha'ar HaKedusha. There are variations of the name, as the Rebbe points out. The Alter Rebbe leans heavily on the first 2 chapters of that first section of Sha'arei HaKedusha, Sha'ar HaKedusha, for the remainder of chapter 1 of Tanya. And in it, Rabbi Chaim Vital introduces us to the doctrine of 2 souls, what Rabbi Chaim Miller calls the doctrine of 2 souls. It's a brand new idea. Obviously, it's rooted in the oldest tradition of Torah. The tzaddikim, they don't make things up. They reveal things as those things come into stark view based on the needs of the generations. Rabbi Chaim Vital published it in this language. First, he introduces us to the natural, original interplay between body and soul. Let's read. Sha'ar HaKedusha, Chelek Aleph, Part 1, Chapter 1. This is taken out of context. I just grabbed the texts that are most informative for us. Just as clothing made to cover the body of man, the tailor, the expert tailor, will make it to fit the form of the limbs of the body. Kain asa hu yisbarach, so did the Holy One, blessed be He, make es haguf, the body itself, shehu levush hanefesh, which is the garment for the soul, betavnis diyoikon hanefesh, according to the image, according to the shape of the soul. The soul wears the body, and just as an expert tailor, when he's making clothing to clothe the body, makes the clothing exactly fitted to the shape of the body, Hashem, who is the expert tailor of bodies, made the body to fit the exact form of the soul. What is the exact form of the soul? First of all, we have Ramach Averim. We have 248 limbs, which means large moving pieces. Vilahem, and for them, serving them, are the Shasa Gidim, are the 365 veins and sinews, Hamekasherim Eso Evarim, which connect the limbs to each other. Ulaham Shechal Yadam, and by way of these veins, the blood and the life force flows me'ever el ever, from one limb to another, kedimyon tzinoires, just like pipes. V'achar yetziras haguf, and after the body was formed and ready and prepared, and the last stitch was sewed, nofach boi, Hashem blew into it, nefesh chaya, a soul of life, kulula meramach evarim, also made up of the 248 limbs, ruchanim, we're talking about spiritual limbs, Mishasa Gidin, and the 365 veins and sinews. Again, we're talking about spiritual veins and sinews, different kinds of energy, different kinds of connections to Hashem. The soul has 248 limbs and 365 sinews and veins, and the body was made to mirror it precisely. That's why the body is shaped as it is, to mirror the 613 various parts. The soul's 248 limbs and 365 veins and sinews were then enclosed enveloped inside the 248 limbs and 365 veins and sinews, shel haguf, of the body, v'oz poyalim everi hanefesh piulasam, and then once the two have been joined together, they have been teamed up, the body and the soul, then all of the organs of the soul can accomplish their duties, their activities, al yedei hakelim, through their garments, shehem evere haguf, which are the limbs of the body. Kagarzen biyad hachotzev, the partnership then in a healthy body is the following. The soul has utter control, absolute control, the way a blacksmith has absolute control over his hammer. The hammer doesn't have an opinion. Or the axe in the hand of the lumberjack. The axe doesn't have an opinion. So too, in a perfectly healthy body-soul relationship, the soul has all the power and the body has no opinion whatsoever. The body should function as a tool, as a humble, silent tool for the body. The body should behave as a humble, silent tool for the functions of the soul. And the proof that this is the natural way of things, that the soul has utter control and the body ought to just follow instructions, is is in the fact that if the soul were removed from the limbs of the limbs of the body cannot function. The body does not function without the soul. Ayin roye, oizen shemas, the eye only sees if the soul is present. The ear only hears if the soul is present. In other words, it's the soul's eye that sees through the garment of the body's eye. It's the soul's ear that hears through the garment of the body's ear. The body doesn't hear, the body doesn't see, the body doesn't move. Ubehistalik hanefesh, if the soul were to depart, chashchu haroyos, the eyes will be dimmed, ba'arubos, v'nisbatlu kol hachushim, and all of the feelings, all of the senses will vanish, miramach evarim, from all of the limbs of the body. This is a description of a healthy, functioning body-soul relationship. But we have a problem. We skipped a little bit of the text, and the next informative for us piece of the Shar HaKedusha is like this, Vida. That is in an ideal world, but you have to know that after the first man sinned and ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And of course, we know this already, we've learned it so many times. Knowing good and evil means becoming familiar, personally, intimately, with the options of good and evil. The result was the result was that both his body and soul took on, or they became connected to kol echad mitoy v'ra, a composition of good and evil. Both the body and the soul become mixtures of good and evil. V'zu hi inyan zu hamas hanochash shehitil bechava ube'adam. And this is the matter of the filth of the serpent that was instilled in Eve, in Chava, and then subsequently in Adam, when Chava gave Adam to eat as well. Now, through this filth that the snake, that the serpent implanted in Adam and Chava, Garmu lahem chaloim. This caused illness, unegoyim, and diseases, umisa, and death, lenafsham, both for their souls. Death became a possibility for a human soul if it becomes detached enough from the source. Ulegufam, and obviously for the bodies which we experience. V'zehu shekasuv, and this double death is expressed in the verse, Ki for on the day that you eat from that tree, die, you shall surely die. Twice death. Misas hanefesh, the death of the soul, becomes a possibility on the day that Adam and Eve eat from the tree. Umisas haguf, and the death of the body becomes a possibility when Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge. Now, not only does it become a possibility, it also becomes a ongoing process. They say that as soon as a person's born, they start dying. That's the body. The death of the body is a perpetual event. Adam and Eve, before they ate from the tree of knowledge, they were not dying. Once they ate from the tree of knowledge, they immediately begin the process of deterioration, which eventually leads to ill health, which eventually leads to, God forbid, something else. And then that's the end of the body. Till Tchias HaMesim. And the soul is more up to a person's behavior. It's up to the person to choose how they're going to conduct themselves, and so on. So now, what does the soul look like once it's a combination of good and evil? And what is the relationship between the body and the soul together when it's a combination of good and evil? V'nimtza, therefore, we find, as a result of the sin and the mixture of good and evil into the soul and into the body, ki guf ha'adam ha'noitzer me'aba yesedes ha'tachtonim, the body of man that is created from the four earthly elements. V'hinehem klulim toivara, all of them are a combination of good and evil. The body of man, then, is a combination of good and evil. The guf ha'adam, the body of man, noitzar, is formed min hatoiv shebe'arba yesedes, from the good part of the earthly elements. Eish ruach mayim afar, fire, wind, water, and earth. That's the good stuff. That's the humble stuff. Amnam, however, min harasha bohem, from the evil that was mixed into them, noitzeru baguf, there was created in the body arba moros, the four humors. Shehem, which they are, halevana, the white one, or halevena, the white one, vehashchera, and the black humor, vehoaduma, and the red humor, vehayeroika, and the green humor. This, of course, harkens back to the first system of determining or trying to determine the source of ill health. Yeah, until the Greek philosophers, ill health was chalked up to demons and devils invading the body. Yeah, it became medicine became scientific, and this was the first step into scientific medicine. The four humors, they are rooted in the different places in the body. The white humor is phlegm. Each humor is a different moisture of the body. So the white humor is phlegm, the black humor is gall produced by the spleen, the red humor is blood, and the green humor is the gall produced by the gallbladder. So the white humor, I suppose, if I'm not mistaken, is related to the lungs. These humors affect the physical health of the person as well as his character and his disposition. So although medicinally we have moved beyond this, but in Kabbalah, this framework has been accepted as a kosher parallel in terms of human character traits and human spiritual well-being, as a good parallel for the four basic elements of fire, wind, water, and earth. Okay, the ka'asher tisga. So now you have these two competing parties. The body, which is healthy, and it wants to stay healthy, and it wants to do the right thing, not spiritually. Yeah, it wants to live. It's built to live. It's built from the good stuff, like Snapple. And then on the other hand, you have the soul that is destructive because it's made from the evil, from the humors which are fickle, if not evil. If at any time one of the elements that are negative will gain power in the body, let's say in one of the elements. So you have the green humor, which is related to fire, even though in the chart it's yellow, but that's not Kabbalah, that's Wikipedia. The green humor, that's related to fire, but fire also has healthy things. It keeps the body active. It keeps the energy in the body going and the atoms hopping around doing what they have to do. That's the good stuff. The bad stuff is the evil that's in them. So if the evil will gain power over the good stuff, what happens is illness will come to the person, and if the negative part of the element gains a lot of power, tamis legufa adam, it will in fact kill the body of the person. Okay, so now we have the body that's struggling just to live, Nebuch. Vihine, and we continue. Nefesh hatahira. There is a pure soul, shehi hapri, which is like the fruit. Kulula mitaryage varim vigidim, which consists of 613 organs and veins. Mislabeshes toich taryage varim vigidim shal nefesh hatmeya, comes to rest and is enclosed inside the 613 veins, sinews, and organs of the impure soul, the soul of the body that's struggling just to live. Hanikras, which is called klipas hapri, the husk, the shell covering the fruit. Now you see, the Shari HaKedusha, Rabbi Chayim Vital, introduced us now to two souls. We have the pure soul and we have the impure soul. The impure soul is in the body, struggling to stay balanced. And it is made up of 613 organs, veins, and sinews, like we said before. It is clothed in the physical body. In it is clothed a pure soul, also made of 613 organs, veins, and sinews. V'nimtzu eivere nefesh hatahira, that means that the limbs and organs and sinews and veins of the pure soul are found toich eivere nefesh hara, inside and clothed in the limbs, organs, veins, and sinews of the evil soul. Ve'eivere nefesh hara toich eivere haguf, and the limbs, organs, veins, and sinews of the negative soul is found inside the limbs, organs, veins, and sinews of the physical body. That now is the story. That is the playing field in which we find ourselves. We have a physical body that is animated by a soul that is impure, called klipas hapri. You see, now you understand why the word klipa is used here. Chayim Vital did not make up that term. It's as old as Kabbalah itself. It's as old as the Torah itself, klipa. But it means the husk, the shell that covers over the precious thing. The precious thing now is the pure soul. Yeah, the husk is the impure soul that protects or covers the precious pure soul. And they are together covered by the body. Okay, so far, we have not seen our favorite terminology for this negative soul. We've seen negative soul, nefesh hara'ah, evil soul. We've seen nefesh hatmeya, the impure soul. What about our favorite now, nefesh habahamis, the animal soul? Where does that term come from? The Alter Rebbe pointed us to these sources. Yeah, we didn't pull these out of a hat. The Alter Rebbe said this is going to be based on the Sharei HaKedusha, Chelek 1, chapter 2, and also Eitz Chaim, the 50th gate. What does it say in Eitz Chaim, the 50th gate? In Eitz Chaim, the 50th gate, we are introduced to the notion of an animal soul. And why is it called an animal soul? So let's pause for a second and remind ourselves so that we're clear. Why is the negative side called klipa? Because it covers over the precious thing, the fruit, the way that the peel of an orange covers over the orange, the fruit of the orange. Now we're going to learn why the animal soul is called animal soul. Now we know, we don't have to be told this. We've been learning Hasidus long enough to know that the reason the animal soul is called the animal soul is because it functions primarily on the level of emotions, instinct. We know that its function is primarily to survive, to live, to enjoy life maybe. To survive is the key element, is the key focus of the animal soul. The animal soul has intelligence, but not dissimilar to the intelligence that, say, a polar bear has. When you watch the Nature Channel, you see how intelligent animals can be. But you also see that no matter how intelligent they might be in, let's say, if we're following the scientists, yeah, in billions of years, they're still just polar bears. They haven't learned how to build igloos yet. How come they didn't learn how to build igloos? They live in Antarctica. They live in the North Pole. They should have learned something. No, because the intelligence of the polar bear serves their instinct. They're not seeking. They're not searching. They're not reaching. They just are. Instinctively, they just are. And their intelligence helps them just to be, not complicated, not what's it called? Sophisticated. The animal soul is very much the same. The animal soul has intelligence, but the animal soul's intelligence serves the instinct. It doesn't direct the behavior. It's not directing the activities of the animal soul. It supports the behavior of the animal soul. It defends the behavior of the animal soul, sometimes even when that's inappropriate. Sometimes a person will make a mistake, yeah, and here comes the intelligence of the animal soul and say, wait. I can give you 101 reasons why that was not a mistake. I can give you 101 reasons why that was the right thing to do at that moment. And you know, even as you're excusing yourself, you know that it's nonsense, because 5 minutes earlier, you saw your neighbor make the same mistake, and you had 101 reasons why that's the dumbest, most foolish, ridiculous thing that a human being has ever done in the face of the earth. No, the difference is that that's the intelligence of the animal soul. The animal soul will argue for its self, its comfort, its happiness. Not sophisticated, not reaching, not rising. The animal soul wants, like the animal, to be comfortable. It takes more for a human being to be comfortable than for an animal, that's true. Human beings need to be honored. Human beings need to be appreciated. Human beings need to be treated well. Human beings need to be clothed and housed and so on and so forth. And so the human intelligence of the animal soul supplies all of these things to the best of its ability. The pursuit of honor and money, prestige and fame and so on. These are all instinctive. This is not a sophisticated creature. The real sophistication is in the godly soul, the divine soul, which we'll talk about next chapter. The animal soul is just an animal. It's reacting in its own self-interest to the situation at hand. That's the extent of the animal soul's intelligence. But where did it get the name animal soul really? Is there more to the story? And the answer, of course, is there is much more, much more to the story. And it's so exciting to see it in the original so that we can learn the rest of the story. No smiles. We don't have any Paul Harvey fans. Okay. Now, we cut into the text in the middle. It was a very, very long text, and it still is a very long text. We'll try to get through it. The Eitz Chaim, which is Rabbi Chayim Vital's record in a very systematic form of the Arizal's teachings, the Eitz Chaim tells us the following, that everything is made up of 4 elements. Yeah. Those 4 elements are reflected in the 4 kingdoms of existence. What are the 4 kingdoms of existence? We have inanimate objects, aka also known as mineral life. Yeah. What is the greatest ability of mineral life? The greatest ability of mineral life is to expand without replicating. To expand. Minerals absorb other minerals, yeah, and convert the other minerals into itself. So that's how the stalagmites and the stalactites, what are they called? In the caves, that's how they grow. They gather other inanimate objects to themselves. And the underwater crystals, they're all very beautiful and they have the ability to expand. So you have the material. The material is the rock, the crystal, the stalactite and the stalagmite. But that's the chomer, that's the matter. They have a form. The form is the soul of life of the inanimate object is its ability to expand. You have the vegetable kingdom. The vegetable kingdom has a very different power that's very, very exciting in comparison, and that is that the vegetable can actually duplicate itself. That's exciting. That's called vegetative life. Vegetative life actually refers to anything that can reproduce without coupling. It's a very exciting kingdom in the world. And that's, of course, everything, as we said, that grows from the ground, or everything that procreates without a partner. Then there's the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom is the animal kingdom. We know everything about the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom is heat. It's warm-blooded. It has the ability to move around. It has the ability to fend for itself actively, aggressively. It has the ability to pursue its needs. That's the animal life. That's the animal kingdom. And then on top of it all, you have the articulate kingdom, the ability to blow hot air. That's not exactly so. The ability to speak articulately. Yes. Which is different, of course, than parrots and those puppies and those goats that know how to make human sounds. We're talking about articulate speech. That's the main feature of the human being. So if you look at it, you'll see, and it's an interesting thing, that each kingdom will feed off of the kingdom that is lower than itself. Or in fact, all the kingdoms that are lower than itself. When the vegetable consumes the mineral is elevated and becomes a vegetable. That's the most exciting thing that could ever happen to a mineral. More than it could ever dream of. When the animal consumes the vegetable the vegetable and the mineral become animal beyond its wildest dreams. When a human being consumes the animal, the vegetable, the mineral, the animal, they all become elevated to the point of what? Let's see. So the Eitz Chaim starts off with the mineral. It combines with the inanimate soul within it. The mineral is not considered food. It's not considered nourishment for the body, for the human body. Therefore, minerals like water and salt, if a person says, I'm not going to eat any nourishment, I take an oath, I'm not going to eat any nourishment, that person is still allowed to consume water and salt, because that's not in the category of nourishment, of food. But then afterwards, when the human being eats hatzemeach, he eats the vegetative life, a vegetable, that's vegetative soul, asher boy, that's in that vegetable, mischaber im nefesh hatzemach sheb'adam, becomes attached to the vegetative soul inside of man. Man has inside of himself all four elements: the inanimate, the mineral, teeth, bones; the vegetative, I don't know, blood cells, I'm not sure; the animal, certainly, and the articulate. And the human being has souls for each of these kingdoms inside of himself. So when he consumes a mineral, when we're drinking our eight cups of water, the soul of the water becomes attached to the inanimate soul that is within the human being, within ourselves. When we consume a vegetable, the vegetative soul of the vegetable becomes attached to the vegetative soul within the human being. And that causes an elevation, a raise for that vegetable's vegetative soul. And that's the most important part. The body of the vegetable is discarded. You take out the nutrients and you discard the body. Yeah? He continues here. Ach, guf hatzemeach yetze besoid moiseres lachutz. The body is expelled outward. V'chein, and so too, moving on, kisha when he eats habal chai, an animal, yetze hapseiles, the refuse is expelled. V'nefesh habahamis asher sham mischaber im nefesh bahamis sheba'adam, becomes attached. The animal soul that is in the animal becomes attached to the animal soul within the human. Shehu me'ula yoser mimenu, which is certainly higher, loftier, more elevated than the actual animal soul. The whole pnimius canal. And in fact, the human version of each of these souls is the innermost version of the souls of all the kingdoms. The vegetable has the external vegetative soul. That's why it's a vegetable. The human being has inside of themselves the innermost vegetative soul, which is why the human being has the right to eat the vegetable. That's why the human being can live from the vegetable, right? We're not taking foreign substances into our bodies. We are taking things that we are essentially connected to. Do you have a question? Okay, let's go a little further. Same thing with the animal. The human animal soul is the core, the innermost layer of the collective animal soul. The actual animal has the exterior of the animal soul, of the collective animal soul. The human being has the innermost core of the collective animal soul. The animal's animal soul becomes attached to the human animal soul, its own core. You see why that's good for the animal. Yeah, this is not an argument against veganism. I'm just saying it's good for the soul of the animal to be attached to its center, its core. It's an elevation for the animal's soul. Canal, the oz, and then misgadolima, it grows like we described. It's an elevation. V'hu soid mazin gufnis. That then is the mystical secret of physical nourishment. But remember, the animal soul of the human is still bodily. That's not the soul for a human being. Remember, we said the vegetable, the mineral, the vegetable, the animal, and the articulate. These are reflective of the four elements. These are the four elements of soul. Just as in the physical creation, there's fire, wind, water, and earth. Those are the four elements of the physical creation. The soul has its four elements: inanimate, vegetative, animal, and articulate. And in fact, each of the four soul elements is made up of spiritual elements: fire, wind, water, and earth. Therefore, they remain as part of the body of the human being. The animal soul, the vegetative soul, the inanimate soul, they remain part of the human body. They're not considered human soul, human life force. In them spreads the final garment. Who? Guf harikim de ba'asiyah. The spiritual bodies of the lowest spiritual realm of Asiyah. We'll talk about that in later chapters. Heim haklipos. We're referring specifically to the spiritual husks that will protect the soul that eventually will enter. For just as the material of the earth, he klipa, is a shell, the guf, and a body, el hapnimi sheba, for the life force that it contains, sheresh nefesh dem tzemeach v'hames chulu, so it works in layers. The earth is the garment for the soul that it contains, and then those souls are in fact a garment for something more refined that they contain. It's layered that way. So then, into the human body that's collected from these four elements. Which four elements? Fire, wind, water, and earth, as well as the soul elements: inanimate, vegetative, animal, and human. The body, the garment of klipa, enters this body first. The hovin zehetiv, understand this well. Seder ela madregas, the order of these layers. V'yaz, and then miklipas noiga de toivara, a garment from, or a soul from klipas noiga, which means a radiant husk. Again, the word klipa, but it's noiga. Noiga means light, bright, a shiny husk. Why? Because it's a blend of toiv vora. It has good and bad in it. Guf v'shamayim da'asiyah. It's a garment, but it's also spiritual, from the spiritual levels of the lowest realm, Asiyah. What happens? That garment, nimshach u'mislabish ba'adam teich nefesh ha'bahamis shabai. That garment is brought into the animal soul of the human being. So now we have physical body, the collective souls, the highest of which at this point is the animal soul, and then there is the klipas noiga soul that's put into the animal soul, and into the klipas noiga soul, which, by the way, this klipas noiga soul is the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, the inclinations. Then you will have clothed into the klipas noiga soul the highest level, the highest spiritual level of the whole realm of Asiyah, v'nefesh shalahem, and their soul, the soul of all of them, meaning the deepest, most central spirit of this whole realm of existence of Asiyah. V'zehu anikra nefesh ha'adam v'nefesh ha'efanim. This is called soul of man, or soul of angels. That's already worthy for the first time of being called the soul of man. V'hine nefesh zu nikra nefesh el nefesh ha'bahamis. This is called the soul of the animal soul. And this soul feeds off the animal soul. Just as the animal feeds off the vegetable and the vegetable feeds off the mineral, the human soul feeds off of the animal soul. But what does the animal soul have to eat? The godly soul, sorry, that's not what the Chaim called it. This spirit, this high spirit, the soul of man, can only feed off the body of the animal soul. What is the body of the animal soul? The klipas nega, yetzer hatev, yetzer hara. V'hine nimtza ki ha'akirus shel nefesh ha'bahamesh ha'ba'adam. So we find that the opacity, the darkness of the animal soul within man, she'oila el nefesh da'asiya, which is trying to rise up to the human soul and attach itself to the highest spiritual soul, nizain mimena, is also nourished by it. Hu goyim laguf lachte. That darkness that comes from the animal soul, that is what causes the body of man to sin. Umi goram le'achirus b'tchila b'nefesh habahamesh haba'adam. Who caused this darkness in the animal soul within man? Vaday nimshach le minefesh habahamesh haba'bal chai. Certainly, it's the result of the darkness that is present in the collective animal soul. Are we following anymore, or are we utterly lost? If we are utterly lost, that's fine, because now is a good time to pay attention, because this is, we're getting to the punchline. Why is there?
I have a question now. If it's the animal soul that causes us to sin, so that seems to be a reason to become a vegetarian.
Except that it's not the consumption of animals that makes us sin. It's the shared soul. We share the soul whether we eat them or not.
Ah, okay.
But this is an amazing teaching and very exciting. Vadai, yeah. Certainly it comes from the collective animal soul, which, as we said, is the same collective soul. Just the animals have the exterior of the collective animal soul, and the human beings have the interior of the collective animal soul. And that's why when man sins, what's the punishment? How do you correct it? He would offer from among his possessions a actual animal, a living being. Why? Shehi garmaloi, because that living being is or contains the level of animal soul that caused that person to sin. Not very popular these days, but it's some very, very delectable teachings here. And then a heavenly fire comes down, and burns up that darkness. And then the animal soul within man gains a merit and a certain purity, because the animal soul within man and the animal soul in the animal are from the same source, from the same root. And thusly man is atoned for. Understand this very well. This is the secret of sacrifices. Now certainly, if the animal soul, which is alive and living and relatively sophisticated, has the ability to fend for itself, it has the ability to find a mate, and it is dark, that soul has darkness in it, certainly then the vegetable soul, the vegetative soul, is much darker, and certainly the inanimate soul is much, much darker. And that's why Gam Him Garmu, and the fact that a human being has the core of the inanimate soul and the vegetative soul in his or her self, they also certainly contributed to a person's failure and faults and sin. and they helped out in getting the person to, in causing the animal soul to sin, because of the evil that's inside them. Since everything in this world now, after the fruit of the tree of knowledge was eaten, everything is a mixture of good and evil. So the souls of the inanimate and the vegetative and the animal, they all have evil inside them, and they all ganged up on the person and brought about a certain darkness that led the person to sin. We're not excusing the person. We're not excusing the person, but this is the science. A person is always free to choose, but there are influences. We're not saying the person is without influence. The person certainly has influences at play in his or her life, and we have to make good choices. But when a person fails, he has to go back and treat the cause, not just the symptoms. We can't say, "Oh, I made a bad choice. That's all." No, that the bad choice is one of the symptoms. There's a real cause. You have to treat the cause and the symptoms. Okay. So what do you do? So therefore, because the inanimate and the vegetative soul are part of the human experience, therefore, there are included in all the sacrifices nisachim, libations, nisiltas, and meal offerings, shehem tzeimeach, which are from the kingdom of the vegetables, right? Grapes and grains. The Nemar, and it also says in the Torah, al kol karboncha takriv melach. Never bring a sacrifice without salt, salt being the mineral. Here, the Alter Rebbe borrows these two texts and does not quote them in their full form. The Alter Rebbe simply says, every single Jew, righteous or wicked, has in them two souls. Period. How do we know? See Sha'arei Kedusha and see Eitz Chaim, which we did. That was fun. What about a scriptural source? Maybe does the Torah tell us about this somewhere, or did it get made up by the Kabbalists? So the Alter Rebbe brings us a verse, and in a rush, I brought the verse and Rashi, because the point of the verse is as follows. We will notice this translation doesn't follow Rashi's translation, which is why I brought Rashi's translation. Let's read the verse, and we'll learn what we have to learn. Key, because the Hashem is talking about when the righteous disappear because there's going to be a punishment, and then when you are punished, your idols are not going to help you. But even then, when I'm punishing you, my anger is not going to last forever, and eventually you'll humble yourself as you always do, and I'll forgive you. Says Hashem, Ki lo la'olam ariv, I'll not always be arguing, v'lo netzach ekseif, and I'm not always going to be angry. Ki ruach milefonai yatef, the spirit that emerged from before me will humble itself, and souls I have made, which means I whom say ki ruach milafana yatef, I am the one who makes the spirits humble, and I'm the one who makes souls. Let's read Rashi so that we know what we're talking about. When the spirit from before me humbles, in its Hebrew yatef, it says when the spirit of man, which is from before me, the spirit of man emerges from before Hashem, humbles itself, confesses and humbles itself, does tshuva because of its betrayal. What about, where do we know that the word ya'atef means humbling? Rashi brings two examples, ha'atufim, humbled with hunger, and when the small child and the suckling are humbled, be'otef. Rashi closes off and says, and the souls which I make. Here is the punchline. A major punchline. It says, ki ruach, for the spirit, milafana yatef, which comes from before me, yatef will be humbled, uneshamois, but souls, ani asisi, I have made. This is bad grammar, ladies and gentlemen, because ruach is singular and neshamois is plural. So the Alter Rebbe is bringing this pasuk to show you that for each human being, for each spirit of human being, there are two neshamas. So here we have a source, and the Alter Rebbe points us to Likutim of the Arizal. I didn't have a chance to bring it into the source sheet. But here the Alter Rebbe points to a source scripturally that each human has two neshamis. And of course, the Alter Rebbe is quick to clarify, we're not talking about neshamis, the high, lofty level of neshama. We're talking about neshamis as in nefashos, souls. What's the function of this? Oh, we're out of time. What is the function of this? So then the first soul we'll deal with in chapter 1, and the second soul we'll deal with in chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, and eventually we'll get back to the animal soul later. But we'll deal with it firstly. We'll say basically, the animal soul, its job is to vitalize the body via the blood. As it says in the Torah, Ki nefesh habasar badom hi, for the life of the flesh must be in the blood. And therefore, the blood shall be spilled on the altar. The actual life of the animal will be offered as an atonement by spilling the blood on the altar, and you must not eat life. You must not eat blood. So much fun and so much to say about this. However, we are out of time. Thank you very, very much for joining. We're going to unmute the microphones if you have something to say. Now is the time.